Welcome to Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I'm Melly, and this is the podcast for people who are determined to find a glimmer of hope even while the fires of life are burning around them. Together, we'll dumpster dive through all sorts of topics like divorce, dating, friendships, grief, career ups and downs, and so much more. All with a sense of humor and absolutely no toxic positivity. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Today's episode is When You Feel Invisible, Faith, Neuroscience, and the Truth About Your Worth. This topic is something that is very dear to me because it is something that I have struggled with quite a bit. And so I'm hoping that through my personal stories, some faith-based encouragement, and some science-backed clarity, I'll be able to help you navigate this difficult but pretty universal topic. So let me start by asking you this. Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're trying to show up, connect, put yourself out there, but it's kind of like no one notices? And whether that's on social media, at work, or even sometimes in your own family, feeling unseen can really mess with your head and your heart. To be honest, these days Instagram has me feeling like I'm screaming into the void. It's hard to try to show up and not get any eyes on these things that I've worked so hard on. And let me tell you, Instagram may be tough, but this is nothing like what it's like trying to date in your 40s on dating apps. Talk about feeling unseen. Some days, I could be matching with somebody and then they just disappear like I didn't matter the next day, leaving me wondering what the heck happened. Or there's times when no one is matching with me and I'm left wondering, does anyone even see me on this app? Please tell me I'm not the only one who's asked this question. But here's the thing. When enough of these things start to happen, we can start to feel like maybe we're invisible, or we even start telling ourselves the lie that we're probably the only one feeling this way. So if you have said that to yourself, let me reassure you right now, you are not the only one feeling this way. Also, you are not broken and you are not irrelevant. There are real reasons you feel this way, and today we are going to unpack them from both a faith and neuroscience perspective. Part 1 is why feeling invisible hurts, and I'm going to dive into a little bit of the neuroscience behind this for you. The human brain is wired for connection and validation. And when we feel excluded, and this can be, at an in-person event, say you feel excluded at a party, or even just not getting likes or comments on a post you made on Instagram or TikTok. Anytime we feel excluded, our brains interpret that as a threat to our safety. It's the same parts of our brain that process physical pain that actually light up during social rejection. Another piece to this is about dopamine and validation. Your brain releases dopamine, which is this feel-good chemical, when people engage with your content, when they smile at you, or when they acknowledge your presence. So when those types of things are missing in your life, your brain actually feels like something is wrong. And that doesn't mean that you are wrong, not at all. It just means that your brain is looking for connection and meaning, and it's being very human. So now, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but I do believe it's very relevant to what we're talking about. I know a lot of people feel invisible, specifically when it comes to social media. I know I do, and it can actually mess with our mental health. So I think it's really important to talk about this. And here's the thing to know about social media. Our brains love it, or at least parts of our brains do. Every time you get a like, a comment, a new follower, your brain gives you this little hit of dopamine, that feel-good chemical that's all about reward and motivation. And it's like your brain will be saying to you, yes, keep doing that. But here's the catch. Dopamine is meant to motivate us toward meaningful goals and habits that give us life, not to hook us on these shallow feedback loops. And unfortunately, social media has been designed to specifically hijack that system. It trains our brains to chase this short-term validation instead of deep, lasting connection. And that can actually leave us feeling more empty in the long run. And to go off on a tangent on top of my tangent, this is the exact same thing at play in the dating apps. But to be honest, I think it's even worse there because while on social media, you're looking for validation and likes and people to say, oh, cool, I want to try what you're doing or look how you're looking. It's trying to find a partner in life, one of the biggest decisions you could ever make. And they've made it this horrible, addicting dopamine game where nobody is actually connecting anymore. Ugh. I seriously hate it, okay? If you can't already tell. So what's happening here? This is basically like eating spiritual junk food. It tastes good for a second, but it doesn't nourish you. And then you're hungry again, and maybe even doubting your value more than before. Let's say you post something on Instagram and you get 10 likes. That might be a lot for you, that might be a little. But the next time you post, what if you only get 8? You're going to actually think that you are less valuable just because the algorithm decided to show your post to fewer people. Why, right? But it messes with our heads. So here's the thing. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines. So when your brain starts to associate your worth with how many likes or views you get, it creates this loop, which says to you, no likes equals no worth. But of course, we know that's a lie. However, the longer you feed that loop, the stronger the pattern is going to become. But there is good news in all of this because you can retrain your brain. And coming at this from a faith-based angle, remember this. God didn't wire us to get our value from strangers just scrolling past us and sometimes hitting that heart. He designed us to find our worth in being known by Him. So when you root your identity in that, in God's value of you, not in algorithms or analytics, you're breaking the cycle. You're telling your brain, hey, this might feel good in the moment, but this is not where my worth comes from. So right now, if you are feeling caught in that dopamine loop, here's something simple you can try. Before you post anything, ask yourself, would I still want to share this if no one responded? If the answer is yes, you're creating from a place of purpose. That's powerful. That's resilience. That's you walking in your calling and not chasing attention. We were created for connection. In Genesis, God literally said it wasn't good for us to be alone. So when you feel that ache of, no one sees me, no one likes me, it's not weakness. It's a sign that you were created for love and belonging. That in and of itself is not wrong. It's just that when we tell ourselves that this external social media tool is how we're going to get that connection, that's when we go off the rails a little bit. And I fully understand that this feeling of invisible is not relegated to just online interactions. In fact, let me tell you something that's still a little hard for me to admit sometimes. I have felt invisible in rooms where I really hoped would feel comfortable to be seen. For example, I've walked into church events or conferences alone. I've looked around and felt like there was this invisible wall between me and everyone else. You know that moment when everyone else seems to already know each other and you're just awkwardly standing there with your little name tag and your half a cup of coffee trying to figure out where you belong? Yeah, that one. And to be honest, sometimes I start spiraling into this internal story. Why am I always the one who doesn't fit in? Or maybe if I were more fun or more interesting, someone here would want to talk to me. But the truth is, a lot of that is coming from my own mindset, and I am really, really working on that. I'm learning to interrupt those thoughts with kindness, not pity, but having compassion for myself, because that is the work, right? We can't always change the rooms we walk into, but we can change the narrative in our minds. And here is where this gets kind of fascinating and oddly comforting sometimes, from a neuroscience perspective. When people are in tight-knit communities, especially spiritual ones like churches, there's this beautiful thing happening in our brains. These people are releasing oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. Oxytocin makes us feel safe, connected, and loved. Think of it kind of like God's glue for human connection. But there's a catch. Oxytocin also has a protective side. It can actually make people more wary of outsiders. Not in a cruel way, at least that's definitely not the intent. Just in a we're bonded and cautious kind of way. So, when you walk into a space where everyone's already hugging and laughing and making inside jokes, your brain's thinking, am I safe here? And their brains might be thinking something like, I don't know this person yet, let's wait and see. It's not a rejection of you, it's biology. And knowing that doesn't fix everything, but it helps take the shame out of it a little bit. At least, I hope so. I don't think God designed community to exclude people. But I do think He knows our biology because He created it, right? He sees the ache that we feel when we're trying to belong. And just like Hagar in the wilderness, which we will dive into here in just a minute, when no one else acknowledged her, God called her by name. He didn't wait for her to get connected. He showed up in the middle of her isolation and made it holy ground. So, if you're someone who's ever walked into a room and felt invisible, or maybe you're just carrying the exhaustion of always being the one who is trying so hard to belong, I just want you to know you are not alone. There is nothing wrong with you. Your brain is just doing what it was designed to do, and your soul is longing for what it was created for. Both of those things are okay. So where do we go from here? We know that our worth comes from God. And while I'd love to sit here and tell you to just ignore external validation completely, that wouldn't be very helpful either, because the fact is we are wired for connection, as we learned earlier. And while we should get that validation first and foremost from who God says we are and our self-worth coming from Him, when that external validation is missing in our lives, the brain can often fill in the blanks with negative stories. So we might tell ourselves, no one cares about me. I must not be good enough. Why should I even bother trying? Here's the problem. When you say stuff like this to yourself, these stories become neural patterns. The more we rehearse them, the more the brain is going to recognize them as truth. But those thoughts are not facts. They're just practiced beliefs that get reinforced over time. And the only way to overcome it is not to just start getting a bunch of external validation, because even if you think that will help, it will only be a temporary relief if your brain is actually wired for these bad and sad thoughts. But the good news is you can change this amazing brain of yours. And we're back to one of my favorite topics, neuroplasticity. Your brain has neuroplasticity, which means it can change with new patterns. So what you can do is start catching the lies. When you tell yourself, I feel unseen right now, catch that lie, acknowledge it, and then replace it with a more accurate thought. You don't have to lie outright to yourself and say, oh, I feel super seen right now, if that's not true, because your brain's going to say, no, you don't feel that. But what you can say is something like this: I feel unseen right now, but I know that I am not unseen by God. You can say something like, this post didn't land how I had hoped, but I know my worth isn't based on external responses. Now, I don't know about you, but when I feel invisible, when I feel like no one is paying attention to me or that I just don't matter, it's easy to start believing the lie that maybe God doesn't even notice me either. But that is absolutely not true. And one of my favorite reminders of that comes from a pretty unexpected place in the Bible, the story of Hagar. If you know anything about this story, you know that Hagar wasn't a queen, she wasn't a prophet, she wasn't someone that people admired or followed. She was actually a slave. She was mistreated, rejected, and literally cast out into the wilderness, alone, hopeless, and unseen. And in that moment, she probably felt like a lot of us do when we wonder if anyone actually cares about us. I won't go into the whole story here, but if you want to read it for yourself, it's found in Genesis chapter 16. But I will give you kind of the Cliff Notes version of what happened. So Hagar was Sarah's servant, and Sarah had been unable to have a child, so she gave Hagar to Abraham, her husband, as a surrogate. So Hagar becomes pregnant with Abraham's child, and Sarah mistreats her so badly that she runs away into the wilderness completely alone. She felt unseen, unheard, discarded. If anyone understood what it means to feel invisible, it was Hagar. But then something actually pretty amazing happens. God found her. The angel of the Lord appeared to her by a spring in the desert, and he called her by name. He told her that her life and her son's life mattered, and that he had a plan for them. And that is when Hagar uses one of the most beautiful names for God that we have in the Bible, El Roi, the God who sees me. Hagar went from feeling abandoned and invisible to realizing that she was fully seen by God. And the same is true for us. Even when you feel overlooked, even when you're struggling to connect, even when your social media posts are met with crickets, you are not invisible to God. He sees you. He knows your heart and he knows your struggles. And just like he met Hagar in the middle of the wilderness, He meets each of us right where we are. You don't need to be famous, successful, or relevant in the world's eyes to matter. You already matter. You are already seen, known, and loved by the one who created you. So, just like Hagar, we sometimes feel pushed aside, forgotten, or invisible in a world that values attention. But God doesn't measure our worth the way the world does. He sees our hearts and our faithfulness. We don't need to chase visibility because we're already seen by the one who matters the most. So what if, instead of obsessing over being seen by people, we refocused on resting in the truth that God already sees us? Because if the creator of the universe sees you, loves you, and has a purpose for you, do you think it really matters if an algorithm ignores you for a week? Even when the world overlooks you, remember that God sees you fully. He sees your tears, your quiet obedience, and your trying. You are absolutely not invisible to him. I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about some practical tools that you can use to rewire and recenter your thoughts, because you absolutely can rewire your thought patterns. One tool that I like to use when I'm in this mode of, feeling low about people not seeing me or not feeling accepted is a tool called Name It to Tame It. And basically what you do is you just say out loud what you're feeling. It might seem silly to, think that would help, but what this does is it activates your prefrontal cortex, which helps your brain regulate emotion. And yes, it really is as simple as it sounds. You just say, I am feeling sad that no one is talking to me. And let me just give you a little caveat. If you are, say, in a public place, maybe a church gathering, and you are feeling that way, you absolutely can say this in your head, because I don't know this from experience, but I'm guessing that if you announced out loud in the middle of, say, a church picnic, I am feeling sad that no one is talking to me, you might get a few looks, and you might not get people talking to you. But just saying it out loud, naming how you're feeling, and giving yourself compassion for feeling that way, understanding that you are human and humans have emotions and you're allowed to feel that. Another exercise that I find really useful for these types of things is the "Is it 100% true" exercise. So what you do for this one is when you have a negative thought, you challenge it. You literally ask yourself, is that 100% true? So for example, if you're thinking, no one ever talks to me, ask yourself that question and really ask it not in a, self-pity kind of way. Bring your brain online here and really think about it. Is that 100% true? Is there a time in your life when someone has talked to you, like ever? Okay, I guarantee we all can say yes to that question. So that means the answer to is that 100% true is no, it's not. So again, just like in the Name It to Tame It exercise, you bring that prefrontal cortex online, which will help you regulate those thoughts. Another exercise you can do to help you rewire your thought patterns is speak affirmations rooted in truth into your life. Say things to yourself like, I am seen, I am safe, I am significant. And if you are somebody who finds these kind of silly, I will admit I did for many years find affirmations kind of silly. But if you think about it, how much do we talk to ourselves, every day? I'm sure if you're anything like me, your brain is running 1,000,000 miles a minute telling yourself things all the time. And we have to be really careful because if we take a step back and look at what our brain is telling us, a lot of it is really negative. We are the ones carrying on this narrative of nobody likes me, nobody's liking my posts, nobody wants to interact with me. Those kinds of things, as I mentioned before, they get wired in there and they become the neural pathways that your brain constantly goes to. So by breaking that pattern with positive affirmations, it really does help you see yourself in a different way. And to go a little personal on this, I'm somebody, ever since my divorce, my self-esteem has taken a major nosedive. The apps have not helped me in that area at all. And I have been feeling really, really low about just myself, and I know that how I look is not part of really who I am as far as my worth or anything. But, when you're trying to date, it gets really difficult to put yourself out there and feel unseen, and then, you blame yourself. So I found when I took a step back and looked at the way I was talking to myself, I would look at myself in the mirror and be like, ugh, gross, you don't look good today. I was telling myself these horrible thoughts. So now, it's not like I stand in front of the mirror and say, you're beautiful, which I probably should, right? We probably should talk to ourselves that way. But instead, when I look in the mirror and I feel myself starting to pick myself apart, I stop myself and I find something to be positive about. Try that on if you are somebody who is going through that as well. Another exercise that you can use is using a journal or even voice notes to track when you're feeling invisible and what triggered it. Look for patterns, write it down, and then go back and review this stuff. And I do have a tool that I will be announcing somewhat soon to help you with this, but for now, just try writing these patterns down and see what's going on there. Another way that you can really help yourself in this area is to create safe spaces for connection. So the brain really thrives on real connection, not this false connection of likes and views. We need to prioritize quality over quantity. So one heartfelt conversation is way more impactful for your nervous system than 100 likes could ever be. And if you don't believe me, just think about those times when you have felt really, really connected. I'm guessing it's probably not when you posted a reel that went viral, although that was probably exciting if that has happened to you. But instead, it's those moments, right? I know for me, when I have connected with just one person and been able to help them, through a difficult situation, maybe it's a breakup or a divorce, and I've been able to sit with someone and just be there for them in that moment, that is what I remember and what has been more impactful than anything I've really ever posted. You can also join small groups. You can use texting as a means of connection. A lot of us are just so busy with our lives these days. But instead of just writing random people online, text a good friend. And if you can, set up a time to get together with that person for coffee or dinner. Engage in meaningful comments instead of chasing viral content. There's a lot of really good stuff happening online. I know in this episode, I've talked a lot about the downside of social media, but there's a lot of great stuff happening too, and you can engage in meaningful connections on these apps if you do it in a way where you're searching for that heartfelt connection. And of course, another way to rewire your brain is to return to truth. Scripture is, one of the best things we can do for our brains. It actually calms our limbic system, our emotional brain, and it brings us back into safety. So some verses that you can look up that might help you with this are Psalm 139, Isaiah 41:10, Matthew 10:29-31. These verses will ground you in your eternal significance. Also, spend time in prayer and stillness. Prayer and stillness can rewire your nervous system over time, which will slow down your stress response and restore your clarity. So as we close here, I just want to encourage you. If you are in a season where you feel unseen or like your voice doesn't matter, please just hold on. Remember this, you are not irrelevant, you are not forgotten, you are fully seen by God. That is true even if your impact isn't always visible to you in the moment. Remember, you're planting seeds, even when it feels like you're just standing alone in silence. Keep showing up, not to be noticed on social media, but because you are called, you have worth, and you have purpose that you need to fulfill. You, my friend, are a diamond, even if the dumpster fires of life around you are trying to convince you otherwise. So if this episode helped you out at all today, I would love it if you would share it with someone who also feels overlooked. And I invite you to join me on social media and reflect on this. Where have I been believing the lie that I don't matter, and what am I going to do to change that today? Be well, friends. Until next time, bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into more of life's big topics with a sense of humor and without toxic positivity. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and if you could leave a review, that helps the show reach more people and change more lives. Thank you so much.